are back with another episode of College Football Forecast. And I will be peering into, I guess, whatever the college football version of Doppler radar screens are to try to figure out what's going to happen in the upcoming week of college football. Already, a game that was very intriguing to me took place in the Sun Belt, hashtag Fun Belt, and I got a chance to catch a team that I'm usually too high on, and I'm too high on them again this year. The Chanticleers of Coastal Carolina. I understand that I don't know if it's the teal turf. I don't know if it's the mullets, but I fall in love with them every year all over again. And they have some dudes, like actually really good football players. So that's part of another reason why I love them. I think that they tackle well. I think that Chadwell is a very talented but not like ostentatious offensive game planner, and they have a good defense that hustles. And Appalachian State is no easy day at the beach. If you play Appalachian State, you've earned your scholarship because those boys play hard and they hit. But yes, tell me about what it is that you feel, know, have intuited about college football since last we met, my friend. Uh-oh. You are muted. It happens. Nope. Yes. Nope. Wait. Nope. You were unmuted for a second, then muted again. I'm not sure what happened. While you're working on that, I will begin to talk about who will be joined by in a little while. Sports History This Week, the podcast host of Sports History This Week, there we go. Yes.
There we go. Yes. College football is our strong suit. Technical issues are not, but happy to be back. Real quick. So like I was saying, like Bill Carroll, the Chanticleers are a team that I also fall in love with every single year. I've been doing it for the past couple of years. Obviously, I believe during the COVID season when they went, 12-1, but they lost to Liberty or something like that. And then obviously last year they had a phenomenal season as well. And then they're sending guys to the league. The main guy last year was Isaiah Likely, who's actually starting to make a name for himself for the Baltimore Ravens. Christian McCall is still a very athletic quarterback, and the fact Jamie Chadwell his name hasn't been talked about for Power 5 jobs, so honestly, and that's a disservice to the work that he's done for Coastal Carolina.
I hear they dangled the South Carolina job sort of in his direction a little bit before they settled on Beamer. That's just scuttlebutt. I mean, I don't have any inside information or anything, but that's the stuff I heard.
Yes. And with no disrespect to Gamecocks fans, and the other USC will dislike me for this comment, he deserves a job that's bigger than South Carolina. All right. He's not a guy that's going to take one step up. This is a guy that's going to take a program to the next level, like he's done with Coastal Carolina, clearly. So the fact that his name has been mentioned for the Wisconsin job, for the Auburn job, for the Nebraska job, is an absolute disservice for what he's done. So I just want to get that out of the way. But the other big thing is that we need to revamp the college football playoff ranking system. It is an absolute travesty that LSU is in the top 10. LSU has 2 losses on the season when there's multiple teams that only have 1 loss. LSU's 2 losses are to the number 1 team in the country, Tennessee, and to a Florida State team that's not ranked. And I understand at the beginning of the season. I understand that LSU is taking great strides since then. But it doesn't excuse the fact that every other team in the nation won their week 1 game. That's just how it is. Why is UCLA being punished? Why is
Oregon pick a team? Yeah.
Honestly, you could at this point you could pick a team. Like let's be real. If we go matchup to matchup, I'm picking the other team over LSU most days of the week. And maybe that's my Brian Kelly bias. And maybe that's because I don't believe he can win in the clutch because he can't. But that's not the point. The point is there are teams that are deserving to be ranked higher than LSU, and they're not. Also, because Carolina deserves to be in the top 25, and they're not. And the most egregious thing is the fact that Texas is ranked inside the top 25 is an absolute joke. There is zero reason Texas needs to be ranked inside the top 25. Just because you barely lose to Alabama, it doesn't mean you're one of the best 25 teams in the country. You lost to Texas Tech on the road in a game you should have won. You lost to Oklahoma State in a game you were favored by 6 points. That is not acceptable. I would really like to see a new revamped system because it's brands over play on the field, and that's not acceptable right now.
Fans of Texas, South Carolina, and other teams that were recently blowtorched by my co-host, please direct all of your ugly DMs, your tweets, your nasty grams, your flaming bags of dog feces to my lovely babyface assassin co-host, Brock Vieira. While I may agree with some of these things, I would never say them out loud because I've lived longer. So we're going to get into some deep dive X's and O's stuff. But before that, because why would I hold back yet another amazing guest? I've had the greatest luck in booking guests for this show. It's not skill. I wish I could say it was. It's all luck. But for those of you who have been waiting on pins and needles to bask in the sheer brilliance of Kalen Jones, the one and only host of the Sports History This Week podcast, your wait is now over.
What's up, guys?
Yes. So in the interest of full disclosure, we mostly, of course, talk about college football, and Brock fires college football coaches. That is what we do here. And obviously you do something slightly more measured, more intelligent, more cultured. And I admire that. And I think I first ran across your work maybe while you were still in college.
Oh, yeah. No, Bill, that's the thing. I've been following you for a long time. Like my first introduction to, hashtag draft Twitter. You're one of my you and Jim Coburn. I think you guys were like some of the earliest people that I remember coming across. Yes. And I remember how inviting you always were and welcoming. And so that's the thing. Like, I don't think it was sheer luck that you booked me, man. Like, it's an honor. It seriously is. The first time I think that we've actually been able to talk face to face after all these years. It's been 7 or 8 years. So Thank you for having me.
well, thank you for being here. So if you do want to talk a little college ball, we will never turn it down. But obviously you want to hear about what you actually do. And then if you would like to, like Brock, anger someone's fan base, feel free to do so. But tell us a little about how you got started, what inspired you, and then what people can expect when they tune in for the podcast.
Yeah, so Sports History This Week, I started this out. History Channel approached me, I think, back in April or May, and we've been rocking since, I believe June was our first episode. And what inspired me, I grew up doing some type of public speaking. I don't know if that really counts. Like I had done some podcasting with The Ringer, where I'd been for 2 years prior to being with History Channel, but the concept is very unique to me, right? Like I'm honestly surprised other entities like ESPN and Bleacher Report, et cetera, don't have a podcast where they have a weekly episodes dedicated to moments in history. And it's a narrative podcast. So what we do each week is we find an event in sports history. We'll excavate it. We'll make it like a documentary style episode. So we do 30 minutes based on an event that happened in sports history. And it's been really fun. We've been able to talk with some really cool guests, and we've been able to talk about a pretty diverse group of subjects. And so the opening episode was Billie Jean King, and that's probably the greatest person I think I've ever interviewed in my life. So that was a pretty good selling point as far as like getting me to join. So if you love talking about sports history, and we do a pretty good range, we talk about 1920s Tungsten O'Doyle era stuff, plus like 2005 I think is our limit, or 2008, whatever 10 years ago was. I think that's just more as recent as we get, but it's a really fun time, and it's been really cool. We have 20 episodes now in the bank and under my belt, so it's been an adjustment from the writing side of it, but it's been really fun.
If you ever decide to do Paul Robeson, holla at your boy. I am locked and loaded and ready. I have all the crazy little factoids you could ever hope to hear. I know his height. I know his weight. I know his GPA. It's a sickness. It's a sickness with me. I know way too much about that man. First of all, beyond the fact that, think about this, right? He was at one point maybe the greatest basso baritone in the country. He was at one point maybe the best end, because they didn't make differentiation between defensive and offensive. Those things, he played both ways in the country. Phi Beta Kappan, lawyer, actor, right? Investor, activist. The fact that he is not one of those people that every American knows bothers me to no end. I am introducing young people to Paul Robeson on a regular basis. I think to myself, I shouldn't be the one doing this. How is he not coming up in your history classes, right?
Well, that's the thing. Yeah, you got to give us a date so that way we can go in and excavate the story, man. Because I want to know more about it. I hadn't heard his name till you mentioned him right now.
And like I said, I really would love to do this. So think about this. When he takes the field for the first time at Rutgers, where college football was born, right? So there's some cool tie-ins there.
There you go.
He's bigger, stronger, faster, right? But he's also smarter. And he refuses to put up with the stuff that black players usually put up with in those days, which is anything, right? I mean, literally anything. They would do
literally.
Words cannot describe the things that were done to those turn of the century black football players. How any of them survived is a minor miracle. And so when people got a little outside of themselves with Paul Robeson, he would let them know about it. And then he would rise to his full height of 6'3" and 1/4 inch, 217 pounds. And they would quickly realize, oh, I didn't sign up for this. Maybe, just maybe, I will keep these words in my mouth till this game is over.
Right. On a field where you can legally get, blindsided by this cat without him having any repercussions outside of a penalty.
Yeah. So I would definitely be down for that. But let's talk more about you, because you're the guest. I'm here all the time. They don't care about hearing me talk. So tell me about how it is that you plan out your show week, and how does the research part work?
So that's been a really interesting part for me, because I'm coming from the reporter side where, you're sticking a microphone in a dude's face and, you have your story right there. This has been more unique, where we have like our producers. I have two different producers who work directly with me. And then we have like two associate producers. We have a senior producer. So we have like a full-blown team. And so what we'll do is we'll assign a story to a specific editor, to a specific producer. And they'll work with one of the associate producers and me. We'll figure out like who we're going to reach out and contact as far as getting in touch for the story. And honestly, like, truth be told, like, I do a lot of research on my own. Like, I'll try to do what I can in terms of finding resources, what I can find on YouTube and the internet. Thank God for that. But we have a lot of different resources at History Channel where a lot of the times our producers are reading books and finding different excerpts and stuff and sending it to me. So that way I understand like what it is we're talking about. Plus, when we have our guests, I want to make sure that I'm prepared and come correct when we're talking to different people. So it's a pretty intense, I think, process, because most of the time we'll plan our stories. We've planned out, I think, all the way through January at this point. So what we do is try to get a few weeks ahead in terms of our production schedule. So we'll spend, I think, like a few days doing as much research as possible. Then you start additionally like adding people on the books for interviews. And we'll try to map those out at least like 2 weeks before we end up trying to record and script. So we'll sit through the interviews. We conduct those. I'll usually juggle, different stories at the same time. For example, like this past week, what were we doing? Oh my goodness. We're doing a story on Muhammad Ali that's coming out, his fight against Floyd Patterson, which is one of the more non-talked about fights that he does. We were juggling that with Blue Jays winning the 1992 World Series. We were juggling that alongside cheerleading. And also we're doing this upcoming episode on the Marshall flight, which I knew of because of the movie, but I had never, done research with. So we usually juggle a few at the same time. We try to get scripting done at least 2 weeks in advance. And then I'll go into, literally, it's my closet. I have a microphone stand set up. We have like padding on the side, so you don't get too much reverb. And I'll sit in there for 30 minutes and recite a script. The producer will listen in. He'll tell me when I'm mumbling, which I do all the time. But once we're done with all of that, it goes to sound design. We go through, we do any pickups and re-records if we need anything, and then we're finished. And it's a pretty fun process because it's collaborative versus what again, like coming from the writing and reporting side where I sit there, I just tap out a story, send it to an editor, they send it back to me, and then that's it. Like it's a lot more, like I said, collaborative, and I would say honestly more thorough because, like you said, we're able to do a lot more research.
Yeah, and that's great. I'm going to let my co-host fire a few questions at you too, because I would talk to you the entire show but I can't do that because that would be very, very, very selfish. Brock, what would you like to know from the Kalen Jones?
Well, first off, when he first started talking, I could hear Bill salivating at the mouth when it comes to your work. You do a phenomenal job. So let's jump into sports history. What are some of the topics that you want to continue to explore as you go forward? Are there anything in particular, or you just want to go down this path?
So, I mean, like as far as like stories that I want to do in the future, I think one thing that is like eating at me is like doing a story on the history of, like the theme songs for all the different football, primetime football. Like I love the Sunday night theme. Love, I guess like the Monday night theme. Like I've already done research. I guess we'd have to wait another year, and hopefully we get renewed. It sounds like we will, to be able to do this episode. But I really want to do a deep dive on how all of those came about. But I mean, generally speaking, I love doing stories where we have a lot of crossover with social impact and sports. And I think, we got a comment, I think recently on our Apple page where someone was like, there's too many episodes, which I counted it. I think it's like 6 out of 20 where we do like stories where you have outright like social issues clashing or crossing with sports and intersecting. But I love doing those stories because to me, it makes sports, what they are for me. For as far as, like me as a Black person, like I've always been able to see sports as a vehicle for people talking about issues in sort of a safe space where there isn't, the necessary like, political, I wouldn't say candor or like agitation that there is with other places. I know that's come up in recent years where people are like, stick to sports, keep politics out of sports. But to me, you can't do sports without it reflecting what our world looks like. And so I think like doing more stories throughout history where we are tackling some of the issues and where sports and society and issues intersect, I think it's really important. And I think it's honestly the most fulfilling part for me. Like I said, the first episode we did was with Billie Jean King, the tennis legend, and for her to be able to sit there and recount everything that she went through as a woman in the 1950s and the movements obviously that happened simultaneously with the civil rights movement in the 1960s. Like, first of all, it's educating. And I think secondly, it keeps us from going back down similar paths. I know that we're wavering and I know we're probably not trying to get into politics here, but you look at the social climate now and you look at history and you see a lot of parallels. And I think that's where, for me, like I see the value in doing a lot of these historical stories is being able to see what's happened in the past and how it, why it matters today and what it says about us as, a human race, American society, culture, etc.
It's funny because you do hear people say certain things as if, Tommy Smith and John Carlos didn't happen, as if Jackie Robinson and Woody Strode and Kenny Washington didn't happen. Oh, and speaking of things, if you ever decide to touch on this, so Jackie Robinson came this close to breaking the color line in football, right? He was playing semi-pro ball in the Pacific Coast League football, right? He was playing baseball, obviously, also, but he was doing both for a while. And two of his teammates did break the color line, or re-break, I guess is the way, because there have been Black players in the NFL, and then they dried all up.
Yeah, they quietly
ushered out of the league. Someday I would like to see, maybe I'll be the one who has to write it, but there should be a book about Joe Lillard. Joe Lillard was unapologetically flamboyant as a player and was a great player. Once again, a great two-way player, and probably the term shutdown corner obviously didn't exist in the time because no one threw the ball really. But the few times that people made the mistake of trying to throw the ball anywhere near where Joe Lillard was playing, they realized, we can't do that. He had great hands. He was 6'1", 190, and was one of the fastest players in the league. This is the time when 6'1", 190 was pretty good size. He was a great punter. He could do anything, basically. He had great hands. He was fast. He played for a terrible Chicago Cardinals team where he was by far the best player on the team. But they still got rid of him because, reasons. But
Yes.
there were meetings to discuss the Joe Lillard problem, right? And most of those things most of it's been destroyed. But there's a few letters that pass back and forth between some of the owners that survive, that make mention of this obstreperous Negro or something, like literally some term like that. I can't remember exactly what term they used, but they clearly were not fans of Joe.
Right,
and
right.
So they were going to get rid of him, and then somebody brought up well, what about Ray Kemp? Well, yeah, I guess he can go too. I mean, he hasn't offended anybody, but what the heck, make a clean sweep. So yes, if you want to know the sort of inside baseball of what I call the brownout period in the NFL, which is. Have you done one on that yet?
No, not yet. I pitched this story, though. That's the funny part. You brought up Joe Lillard because I think it's December. It's the first week of December. I don't remember the date. But I know he played his last football game the first week of December, 1930-something.
34.
And he was the last one until, I think, the 1940s or 50s, whatever it was. And so I was like, oh, that would be a really fun episode. Next year, we're going to have to do this. And next year, we're going to have to get you on.
Yeah. I don't threaten me with a good time. But yes, so in 46, the AAFC integrates, and they did it not because of some enlightened moment, but because Los Angeles Municipal, the story. Okay. They wouldn't allow you to. Okay. So they wanted to use the Coliseum. The Coliseum had a rule saying that you couldn't have a segregated event there, including the players. So that's why the LA Dons of the AAFC rebroke the color line, really, in football. And they would not have done it otherwise, or at least I don't believe they would have done others, but they had to. So the LA Municipal, what do they call it? Coliseum.
I should know. I'm from out here.
Right. But whatever they call that, the people that run the LA Coliseum said, no, you can't do it. It's like, well, what if okay, sure. And then after that, it's like, okay, cool. And then were there incidents? Yeah, a few, but it wasn't so bad. And you're like, okay, it wasn't too bad. Let's bring a couple more in. But they kept the number low. They didn't go crazy with it. Right. But yes, we very narrowly missed having Jackie Roosevelt Robinson break the color line in the NFL or within the AFC, but it folded in 49. And so all those players got absorbed, all the good players got absorbed, including the good black ones, joined the NFL, including one guy who's, now in the Hall of Fame. And when I sort of dug into his life, that's Lynn Ford. He was a member of the LA Dons. Also, he came in after because he was still in college until 40. Well, he left college to go to the war, and then the war ended. He went right back to college, and then he entered the. Wait, he didn't get drafted. He got signed as an undrafted free agent. We don't care about that. Brock, did you have a follow-up question?
So I did, and some people don't want to hear it, but I always do. And to say that sports has no place in social issues is that's just a stupid remark by ignorant people. So with that being said, I want to throw out some situations that happened recently. And with your knowledge of the history of sports and social justice,
sure.
Where do you see these events being maybe 10 years, 15 years down the line? How are they looked at? So the first one I want to bring up is during 2020, when obviously the COVID pandemic was going on and the George Floyd murder happened, Dabo Swinney made a statement saying in the Black Lives Movement, when that was going on, that football matters. And that was taken in a really bad way, as it should. Do you think that that's something that's going to haunt Dabo come the end of his career? Do you think we're just going to sweep that under the rug?
I think ultimately with Dabo, with coaches a lot of the time, their legacies are tied up with championships. And so unless he has a complete burnout at, Clemson and the CFP, I know you were just talking about the rankings. I don't know how they're top four, but they're ranked in the top four right now. There's a perception that they are, in that class of elite football teams. And so that will always override whatever, shortcomings an athlete or a coach has if there's overwhelmingly talented. And I think that's been the case throughout history, unless, they're outright, egregiously either racist or they do something that is foul outside of football or whatever sport that they play. And so I think with Dabo, his reputation outside of football, like as far as like us as pundits and people who analyze the sport and talk about it and, just casual fans, I feel like there is a perception that, he's kind of a bit goofy and is a little bit more football intensive and doesn't really see like anything outside of faith, what is it, the 3 F's? It's football, family, and faith, so that's really what drives him. And that's okay in the context of, him doing his job really well. At the same time, he won't be remembered as being like a social justice warrior, champion of, his players' rights. I know that I think he even made a comment about NIL, not recently, but I think a few years back when the prospect of it even came up. And he was pretty anti, players making money while he was being one of the highest paid coaches in college football. So I think history will, for the most part, overlook it, especially, again, if he picks up, another CFP berth or, wins another title. Ultimately, it'll be a quiet part of his legacy, but it won't be the first thing that we think of when it comes to Dabo Swinney. We'll think about Trevor Lawrence and, some of the other outstanding players that he's coached at Clemson.
Yeah. In fact, I don't remember the exact quote, but he at one point threatened to quit. Remember that? The players, remember that? Yeah. Old, was it freezing cold takes? Yeah, thank you for that one, freezing cold takes. But yes, at one point he threatened to leave coaching if players got paid. So at some point, I guess he backtracked from that because the last I checked, he's still coaching.
Right. That's the thing. Everyone gets paid. I think it's so strange to me that coaches are so, especially in college football, the fact that so many are anti-players getting paid when they're getting paid, upwards of, tens of millions of dollars, it doesn't make any sense, especially when this has been the case in college football, since, at least as far as I know, since at least the 1960s. That's as far as research I've done, where you hear about bagmen and people getting paid under the table. This has been going on in college sports forever. And so the policing, at least the moral public stance that a lot of coaches seem they want to take is very, very fascinating because this is the game. And especially for coaches who know who will do whatever it takes to win. It doesn't make any sense to me why they're all out here saying it doesn't, questioning why college football athletes are getting paid when, the colleges themselves rely on the revenue that those football players are bringing in. And the coaches themselves rely on bringing in the talent and then coaching up that talent. Sometimes not even really coaching it, just letting the talent do its thing and getting paid millions of dollars as a result. So it definitely is. I forget. I'm blanking on the word, but yeah.
The word is hypocrisy.
Thank you. Hypocritical. Thank you.
Yeah. It was like, what was that? Password? Was that the game show I'm thinking of? The word is hypocrisy. But yes, it is one of those funny things. It's like walking into a feast, right? Where everyone's got like giant turkey legs, like at medieval times. And then you ask, may I have some? It's like, no, you can't eat it here.
I haven't been there in so long. Oh my God, medieval times. That is what happens now.
So I'm going to let you have your life back in a moment. Final questions. I'll let you have a final question, Brock, and then I will give my final question.
Absolutely. So my last question is, in the current landscape of college football, the big thing that is taking over, you understand there's Jackson State and HBCUs in general. Obviously, there's going to be a big push for them to go to the FBS level once they have the talent and everything to go there. Could we see a pushback from the blue blood schools and an institution of rules that directly tie getting in, like stadium capacity, funding, things of that nature?
That is a good question. I'm trying to think of what Jackson State. I know that they were one of the leaders in terms of attendance among HBCUs. I don't know. I forget what their division or their conference is. Forgive me, but I mean, it wouldn't shock me if you see like Jackson State at least get a push. I think it fully depends on whether Deion Sanders stays there. And I know that he's been at least, in the mix for some of these open, Power 5 jobs. I think ultimately what he brings, not necessarily the credibility, obviously it comes with it, but it's the eyeballs, it's the attention. We care, it's sad to say, but like general media cares about HBCUs and Jackson State football because Deion Sanders is there. And I know that there was the whole blow up with him and Eddie Robinson about who's SWAC and who isn't, but the fact of the matter is, it's similar to prize fighters in the 60s and 70s. It's you talk, or maybe not necessarily. I don't even think Deion Sanders is necessarily talking that much as he used to. But the fact that he's able to draw attention the way that he does for an HBCU like Jackson State, I think is why there's even we're discussing it right now. Like why they would even be in the discussion for being one of those teams. Like you guys were talking about Appalachian State, similarly to them. Like a few years ago, they were able to make the jump from FBS or FCS up to FBS, and a lot of that. And we did a story on that actually, like one of our episodes for Appalachian State. We talked about them upsetting Michigan,
Yes.
And some of their leaders still talk about that to this day. They say without that victory, they might not be at the FBS level where they are now. And obviously they're doing pretty well for themselves right now, showing that they can hold their own in it. And so as far as like answering your question directly, as far as like, would Jackson State be able to make the jump? I don't think they would, only because, again, I think it's really much tied into how much Deion Sanders would be invested there. And how much success they continue to have. Like you said, there's the other factors that contribute to that, as far as the numbers in terms of the attendance, the revenue they're able to bring in, and then the matter of like which conference would you even put them in after the fact. So I think there's a lot of questions, especially with realignment coming up and all these new TV deals providing money for a lot of different Power 5 schools in particular. I think that kind of can end up being a gatekeeping aspect. Again, I'm sorry for not having particulars on it, but it just seems like it would be a very uphill battle for Jackson State to get into the FBS right now.
Yeah, it unfortunately or fortunately, depending on how you feel about it, because it would mean the disruption of all this tradition, because nobody could really go with them, right? There's nobody else who's quite in that position, and then they would have to find their way in a very different world from. Once again, who's SWAC, it wouldn't matter. I mean, at that point, the SWAC might not survive if they lost Jackson State. Well, they probably would survive, but they would be diminished, I guess is what would happen. Yeah. So my question goes to, you just mentioned that you sometimes get some pushback or complaints or whatever when things get a little too, I don't want to have to think about these unpleasantries when I'm just trying to enjoy some sports. Is there ever a discussion about how far you can go with certain things?
Oh, yeah. And so actually take that back. I don't think there really is too much of a discussion, because right now what we've tried to do is, I don't even know if it's a conscious thing. That's the funny part. Like now that I think about it, when we go into our pitch meetings, it's not like we're sitting there like we have to do an episode on, transgender rights in tennis. So it's not like we sit there and think we have to do an episode on, Muhammad Ali facing Floyd Patterson and talking about, the moral crusade and the idea of, self-empowerment for Black people and Catholicism versus Islam back in the 1960s. We don't consciously think about this. Sure, we think it's a good storyline. I think that's what ultimately it comes down to is what, for one, me as the host, like I usually have a pretty significant say in like which stories we end up doing. But at the same time, for me, like my producers do a lot of the carrying work, like a lot of the grunt work. And obviously, like I try to do as much as I can myself, so that way they're not saddled with it completely. But I'm doing 2 or 3 stories a week. So they are carrying a lot of the weight as far as, the research and reading. I think for me, like I do a lot of video watching and listening to podcasts and make sure our guests, like trying to make sure that I come correct, knowing who they are before they come and talk to me for an hour. But it's not really a conscious thought where I'm like, yes, we need to talk about social issues. I think it goes back to what I was saying earlier, where sports and politics are intertwined. I think, again, like sports has always been a way for us to understand the world in a matter that is physical, that involves some level of violence in some circumstances, but isn't war. You know what I mean? Like,
Right.
like there's a lot of ways for ideologies to clash physically without there being any particular, significant ramifications. Like, this isn't politics. You're not going to have, Nancy Pelosi or I don't know, some other politicians suit up in football helmets and whatnot and go run an Oklahoma drill. Like there's going to be no ramifications ultimately like that. So that's the thing. Like, I know that we have a lot more lighthearted stories that are going to be coming up, but naturally, because sports are intersected with our culture and society and politics at large, it's going to be impossible to do a show without it, especially when you're talking about history. Because, ultimately, yes, we love talking about sports because they can take us away from stuff that, matters, like how crazy the world is right now. But at the same time, we're not going to do an episode historically looking back at, the Thursday night football game where the Eagles beat the Texans, on a random game. It's good for us in the moment to be present and just focus on something that doesn't have to do with politics and life and everything else that goes on in our individual lives. But ultimately, what has the lasting legacies is the stuff with the substance, or the stuff that is, I don't want to say historic, obviously, record setting or unique within, the fields that we're talking about. So it's just natural.
Right. Well, first of all, let me say, if we could somehow get like a bull in the ring drill, Pelosi versus Lindsey Graham, I would pay good money to see that, Caleb. So if you know somebody who could hook that up, let them know I've got $20 that I would pluck out to see the two of them just line up and boom.
Oh my gosh, I don't want to know how that would go.
I got $20 to find out.
I was going to say, I'd take Pelosi, actually.
Yeah. Well, she's got the lower center of gravity. There's a bunch of things I think that would help. So before you go, please tell everyone where they can find your amazing work, how they can follow you on your various social media, and if you've got something cool to tease away.
Yeah, so you can follow our show, Sports History This Week. You can get it wherever you get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, Stitcher, etc. Make sure you subscribe, rate, review. We love it. As far as like my socials, it's just my name at Kaelen Jones, Kaelen. Going to be losing that blue check mark soon when Elon Musk takeover is complete. So looking forward to that.
Oh, yes. Well, no matter what happens to your check marks, you will always be FOS friend of, well, I guess so, FOTS friend of the show. So you'll always be blue check marked in my heart. And I will be looking forward to everything you do going forward. Feel free at some point to return if there's something else cool coming up. And Brock, obviously you are, I guess, slightly younger than Kaelen. I can let you know that if you want to ever like bother somebody about how to be successful in this incredibly stupid and very competitive business, well, you know what I mean. Not stupid in a bad way, but stupid in a random.
Oh, it's like, stupid in a bad way.
Okay, well, yeah, that too. Right. Okay, good point. Okay, yeah, that too. Yeah, you're right. Don't be afraid to hit up Kaelen. He's an incredibly giving person and one of my favorite people out there in the industry.
Yeah, and likewise the Bill, man. He's already helped out the show. You helped us with our NFL, our AFPA, our AFP episodes. So
that's right.
Thank you for that.
Hey, once again, definitely my pleasure. Please, if you have any interest in the confluence where things that have happened in history and things that have happened in sports meet, which is a lot of them actually, this is the show for you. It's that you've been waiting a whole your life for this, and Kaelen Jones is giving it to you. You're welcome. So once again, I thank you so much for your attention, your talent, and your time. You, now that you are an FOTS friend of the show, feel free, if you ever have something else you want to, dangle out in front of the folks, let me know, and I will get you on.
Absolutely. Thank you, guys. I really appreciate the time. Seriously, Bill.
My pleasure, sir.
Nice meeting you guys.
Yes, I will see you again soon.
Thank you for coming on.
Woo! Woo! Okay, so I'll be honest with you. I didn't think we were going to have a guest. Had someone pull out at the very last moment. I in the back of my mind was the thought, Caitlin Jones and I have always wanted to do something together. I said, Caitlin, what are you doing? He said, not too much. Like, he's busy. He's always busy. But he said, I'll make time for you. And I was like, oh. So even though he doesn't fit with our sort of normal focus, he's cool people and his stuff rocks. So if, like I said, if you care at all about really the world, which is what the history of sports ties into, please check out his amazing podcast. Hey, we are behind on our commercial messages, but we'll be back.
In 2006, we founded Yeti Coolers with a simple mission: build the cooler we use every day if it existed. One that was built for the serious outdoor enthusiasts rather than for mass discount retailers. One that could take the abuse we knew we'd put it through, out in the field and on the water. One that simply wouldn't break. We decided early on that production innovation would come from necessity and first-hand experience, not from market research and data analysis. Today, Yeti products perform when it matters most. Whether that be an excursion into the remote Alaskan wilderness, chasing redfish on the Gold Coast, or just getting together with friends in the backyard, we make gear that helps you stay out longer, travel farther, and live harder.
Enjoy 40% off site-wide. Vitable takes the guesswork out of feeling good. Get your own personalized daily vitamin pack safely delivered to your doorstep every month. Take their online quiz to find out which vitamins and minerals can support your personal needs based on your own diet and lifestyle. Hashtag only what you need, nothing that you don't. All vitamins are manufactured in Australia at the highest quality standard. Ingredients come in the best form for their absorption by your body. Enjoy 40% off site-wide using code NBS40 at checkout.
This commercial is brought to you by TrueBrain. Say hello to TrueBrain. We're not magicians. We're not going to turn you into a rocket scientist, unless you're already a rocket scientist. We're not Big Pharma, and our products are custom made to boost mental output. We empower people to do their best thinking.
So riding that high, let's do some X's and O's stuff. So speaking of the confluence of the real world in sports, I'm going to be talking about DJ Durkin, and I cannot talk about DJ Durkin without acknowledging that while we have rightly taken to task people like Art Briles for his role in a massive long-term cover-up of sexual assault at Baylor, DJ Durkin directly contributed to the death of a young man, and his family is not whole, right? That has not been, it's not over for them, and it'll never be over for them. We cannot simply allow us to move on from the fact that his actions or inactions regarding this young man's health led to him losing his life. So when I made, I don't know, an offhand remark about DJ standing for, dead just for conditioning, it wasn't meant to be a joke. It was to remind myself that people have allowed him to move on, and I'm not quite ready to allow Mr. Durkin to move on. But nonetheless, I have to talk about his defensive schemes. So here we are. And you get the slightly lighter load of talking about the offense, where, as far as I know, no one has had to die. So let's dig a little bit into this matchup. And I'll let you go first.
Well, I have the later position of being the offensive coordinator for the University of Florida. But before I do that, I don't want to have the light load. DJ Durkin does not deserve a job. And the fact that he's been the defensive coordinator at Ole Miss and at Texas A&M is the complete representation of the fact that it doesn't matter really what, it matters who you know. Maryland was ready to let Durkin resume his position after the death of Jordan Phillips, I believe is his name. I don't have his name that unfortunately passed away.
Jordan.
Was it?
The young man's name was Jordan McNair.
Jordan McNair, thank you. Jordan McNair. DJ Durkin's a phenomenal defensive coordinator. He's quite frankly the only reason why Texas A&M has any wins on the season. But it doesn't excuse the fact of what he did when placed in a position of power. How he still has a job is it's expected, but still disappointing. With that being said, we're going to move on to the later note, and that is talking the X's and O's of Florida and Texas A&M. Florida's offense literally revolves around one man, and that is Anthony Richardson. And of course, you're going to say, yeah, no duh, Brock. He's the quarterback of the team. But what I mean by that is he's such a phenomenal threat with both the football, passing, and running that they can do a bunch of different things for him. The reason why they kind of fell behind Georgia early is that hit really low and it really limited his mobility. When you force Anthony Richardson to be a pocket passer, he's not that good of a quarterback, unfortunately. Now, there's a time when we thought he was the number 2 quarterback in the nation after he beat Utah, and then he followed it up with a dunk the next week against Kentucky. So the best way for Florida to really utilize his strengths is to start with a really solid RPO and run game. And he's not out of shotgun. You use a lot of those read option concepts. And you just got to get him moving. Move the pocket. Move him in different positions. Have him not be a target that's standing still. Because when you move him out, defenses are forced to adjust, and they can make throws on the run. So I really would like to see a lot of throws out to the flat, a lot of short dink and dunk that's going to open up the deep pass, and again, a lot of RPOs, read options, and runs to really soften that defense behind the offensive line that they have.
Okay. And I'm going to throw up no, not because we're talking about DJ Durkin. I'm going to throw up an overlay that will – he was a 3-4 guy for a long time, and he's greatly influenced by, as so many defensive coaches are, by Coach Saban. And he is now effectively a multiple front, but mostly runs – we say 4-2-5, but it's really a 4-2-4 plus 1. And I'll explain what I mean by that in a moment. So – what they want to do is be aggressive, right? Well, what defense coordinator doesn't say we want to be aggressive, right? I've never heard a single one say we want to be passive. Even the ones that are read and react all day long don't admit to it. They all say they're aggressive, even if the ones that aren't. So that's not really, as you said, no duh, whatever you said. That's aggression. Like that's something I think you're required by law to say you're going to be aggressive when you're a defensive coordinator. So this shows not his particular actual defense, but a defense that's similar. It's actually the 49ers. But they run a very similar scheme. It's an underfront. They are in nickel, but it's not really nickel. Well, it's nickel plus. Or once again, when I say 4-2-4 plus 1. So one of the extra safeties is a rover or monster or spur or pick another term. That's another one I've heard. But, you know, he basically can be at any one of 3 levels of the defense. So sometimes this angel is another term I've heard used. Angel, right? That's what's his name called in their scheme, angel. But he could be anywhere from deep middle, right? That's what Kyle Hamilton did at Notre Dame. He was the plus 1 in their 4-2-5, which is really a 4-2-4 plus 1. Sometimes he's over the slot. Sometimes he's essentially an extra EMLOS, right? In man on the line of scrimmage. So he can get some easy blitz pressure. Sometimes he's an actual linebacker. I mean, you're running a 2 linebacker defense, but he suddenly becomes that 3rd linebacker. So you get a 4-3 look. So in that 4-2-4 plus 1, you've got a player who can rob, right? So you see this deep end cut that's going to be run here. That player who normally you would think is going to vacate instead can lurk. He can rob, right? He can come forward and come down into the box and help in the run game. He can just blitz, and they will blitz with that player a lot. And then you can go and cover 6, which is also his quarter, half, and he's that extra quarter guy, right? When you're on the side where you're more concerned, right? So you're either it's to the boundary side, you go with the half, and then to the field side you go quarter. Or if you have a player that you want to bracket, you can go cover 6 or quarter, half, and bracket that guy by having him be the underneath or over the top over that player that worries you. So I'm going to drop down the overlay. And you mentioned, obviously, AR-15, as they call him, Mr. Richardson, who is a true dual threat. Sometimes that angel Spur, Rover, whatever, is the spy, right? A lot of times his job may be to go wherever Mr. Richardson goes, follow his eyes. If he takes off running, go get him. If he wants to throw it, track his eyes and try to see if you can lurk, and slip underneath and snag a ball. So there's a lot of things you can do in Durkin's scheme. And one thing I think you're going to see, I know I've talked a lot about zone pressures. I've talked about them a lot because they are really proliferating in college football. And I think he's going to run a lot of, both 2 and 3, 2 and 3 deep, and still blitz out of it, still find a way to get pressure out of it. And that is the thing you want, right? I mean, you want to find a way to not have to be man to man, because that makes you scared a little bit. Unless you really love your corners, then you might feel better about it. But unless you really love your corners, only a handful of coordinators love their corners so much they're willing to, stake their reputations on them. You're going to give those guys some help by either being in a true, zone or a partial zone, like a combo coverage, where you might, when you see those guys do the whole banjo thing, when you see that strumming, they're singing to each other. And I guess to anyone who knows football, that it's going to be a combo coverage, a banjo coverage, where you might be zone underneath and man-to-man over the top, or vice versa, or one side of the field is zone, the other side of the field is man. You'll see some of that as well. So what are some of the weaknesses you might want to attack, Brock, in a defense such as the one that Durkin runs?
It's really simple. It's a short pass. When you look at that formation, so when you design your offense, you have to have multiple sets from multiple situations. In college football, we've been seeing coaches just call the formation, and then once they see the defense, and call the play. If they're gonna play, if they're not gonna press you, you want to throw that wide receiver screen super quick. If they're gonna jam you at the line, there's really nowhere to go besides that, unless you want to go up the middle and hopefully a hole somewhere develop. So first thing you want to do is establish the wide receiver screen and get them more, and make the defense helps out more on the outside. The second thing you want to do is run the inside zone. It's gonna be really easy. Combo block well. That's only depend on your offensive line. If you combo block well, there's really no secondary layer of protection. So if you find the hole, you're basically gone for 6. So that's another thing that I really want them to establish. And to me, if I'm Florida, I look at the Appalachian State game. Appalachian State was literally able to run all over the Aggies. And then because they're able to run all over the Aggies, that really set the short and medium passes with the tight end and got those guys out into open space. So that's how you're going to want to attack DJ Durkin's defense. You want to soften them up early with short passes and runs, and then you can hit them for those medium gains. You're really not going to hit them over the top that often for those big touchdowns, especially with a guy like AR-15. We use the term dual threat too much, and that always refers to a guy that can run the ball. But that necessarily doesn't say that he's a great passer of the football. To me, if you're a dual threat, you got to be great at passing and great at running. And unfortunately, AR-15 isn't that. So you're not going to be able to hit them deep all the time. So you really want to make sure you emphasize that quick passing game to open up the medium to medium-long routes down the field later on in the game.
Yeah, and as I mentioned, you're going to run some quarters match, a lot of cover 3 press, which is similar to what you see the Seattle Seahawks run, and then a true, middle of field close cover 1, with a single deep safety. They will very rarely go man and almost never go zero. Despite the fact, as you said, that they don't really have to worry that much about the deep passing attack, because that is not the strength of Mr. Richardson, though he has a very strong arm.
Strong arm.
Very strong.
Money, I toss up on the day.
Yes. Right. So the AR-15 thing is, I guess the sights might be slightly misaligned on that AR-15, but yes, a lot of high RPMs, a lot of feet per second coming out of that. Okay, so we're going to have another quick break, and then we're going to dig a little more deeply into some other matchups.
Pickup is a fan engagement platform that aims to build communities and turn the biggest headlines in sports into free-to-play props while rewarding fans for their hot sports takes. You've likely seen their props on Nuts and Bolts Sports and some of your other favorite online publishers in leagues like USA Today, NASCAR, Flow Sports, and others. Simply make your pick on the Pickup prop and verify your pick
by entering your phone number, which you will use to track your picks. Accumulate points and exchange for prizes in their marketplace. Their merch ranges from Fanatics gift cards, cross nets just in time for summer, dugout mugs, and more. Make your picks ahead of the draft now.
All 22 is the future of scouting databases. With over 20,000 players, All 22 allows you to be the GM. All 22, the global scouting network.
So we're going to hit on one or two more games, and I'll let you lead off. So is there a game out there? And I obviously know that there's probably a game or two out there, but what game are you most excited, other than the one we just discussed, about watching this week?
Well, I got to go with the game that's near and dear to my heart, and that is Hawaii playing the Fresno State Bulldogs. That is one of the, in my opinion, one of the great underrated rivalries in all of college football. They've had some absolute instant classics, some upsets, some blowouts, every kind of scenario that you could imagine it have had. When it comes to my personal fandom, there are several games that stand out as great moments in the rivalry. That would probably be Hawaii defeating Fresno State in 2001 by Nick Rolovich and Ashley Lee being the deadly combination. Obviously, that David Carr is their starting quarterback. They were riding high, had a really good season, and then they come to Hawaii on national television, and then they lose in an absolute dramatic fashion. Nate Jackson, safety for Hawaii, who probably weighed about 130 soaking wet, but was a hard hitter, came around the corner and blitzed David Carr, causing a forced fumble, which eventually led to the game-winning touchdown. Another one that really stands out in my mind was probably the 2013 matchup, I believe, or 2014. It was under Norm Chow. Fresno State was up huge. Hawaii scored 35 unanswered, but Fresno State was able to squeak out a 3-point win. That was really devastating for me, who was obviously University of Hawaii fan. There's some really great games for Fresno State. There's games where they smoked Hawaii multiple times, especially during that Norm Chow era. Getting over the hill where Hawaii blocked the game-winning field goal in 2016 is a game that sticks out because that qualified Hawaii for the 2016 Hawaii Bowl. Hawaii's first bowl appearance in about 10 years at that point, or 9 years, 6 years. 6 years at that point, and then when they won, it was their first bowl win in 10 years. After that, then it went on a run through Rolovich's next 3 years as head coach, and then under Todd Graham, Hawaii beat Fresno State 2 times in a row. First time was up in Fresno, and then second time was when Fresno State was ranked. They beat UCLA. They had a really close game against Oregon, which they lost. Came to Hawaii. They were riding high. They had obviously Jay Hayner, Ronnie Rivers, a really good wide receiver whose name is eluding me right now. Hawaii forced 6 interceptions. Corey Bethley, now at Arizona State, was a guy that really stepped up in that game. And that was kind of, if there's any bright spot for Hawaii fans of the Todd Graham era, it was that game because that was Hawaii's first win over a ranked opponent. And it was a long time.
I think 6 or 7 years. Yeah.
Yeah, at the very least. You have to go back several head coaches to see the last time Hawaii had a win over an opponent. So I think it might have been since 2008 when Hawaii beat Fresno State on the road. Hawaii's first and only ranked win on the road against a ranked opponent. So with all that being said, Fresno State's a clear favorite. I think they're 28-point favorites. They're 4-4 right now, 3-1 in conference, 3 straight conference wins. Jake Hayner is coming back as well. Fife, the backup, has done a really phenomenal job in the meantime. And Hawaii defense has only given up 19 points on average in their 4 conference matchups. But this is going to be a whole different type of beast. They really look a lot better coming off the bye week. I'm hoping Hawaii can pull it off, but all arrows point to Fresno State. However, as a diehard UH fan, this is a game I've had circled on my calendar for a long time. I'm really hoping that Fresno State can, poop the bucket once again. With that being said, there's a really big matchup I want to highlight. Zion Bowens, Hawaii versus former Hawaii cornerback and Fresno State cornerback Cameron Lockridge. That's going to be the great matchup to watch out. Zion Bowens very good, very explosive. You've seen spurts of it against Michigan as well. When you talk about the competition he's faced, Cam Lockridge is probably Fresno State's best corner at the moment. Very, very lengthy. Is able to kind of read hips pretty well. He really wasn't giving up a lot plays at UH. There's some here and there, but not for the most part. It was pretty consistent. So that's going to be a very interesting thing to watch. Hawaii's front four against Fresno State is going to be very interesting. They've had a massive improvement since the bye week, like I mentioned, but they're still finding it difficult to generate pressure. If you give Jake Hader time, he will pick you apart. So another thing I want to look at. I'm very excited for that game. And side note, for anybody that is thinking about attending Fresno State University is literally built like around a farm. It feels like. I was literally in Fresno with my girlfriend to visit her baby brother. We took a wrong turn, and we somehow ended up on an old road with goats and horses and chickens, and we kept going, and then somehow we ended up behind Fresno State Stadium. So it's just a very interesting way Fresno State is laid out. Hopefully Hawaii can go out there and win. I just want to just throw that little tad bit that Fresno State Stadium is literally surrounded by a farm. I think that's just very interesting.
Yeah, well, they're very proud of the agricultural richness of the Central Valley. I think the Valley V has like some sort of vegetable or something in it. I have to go back and look on the helmets, but yeah, they're very proud of the raisins and potatoes and corn and, as you said, goats and milk and everything else that comes out of the richness of the Central Valley. And of course, if not,
as they should. It was just a very odd, literal like testing horses and chickens and goats, and then
yes, no, I understand. So you've mentioned your disdain for Brian Kelly. Well, you will revel in the next matchup, Brock. So Alabama, a displeased Alabama team with a couple of weeks to prepare, will be facing LSU. This will not be a good week to be Louisiana State University. So the line on is 13.5, and that normally would be a number that would frighten me. It does not frighten me this time. I'm not a betting person normally, but I have a strange feeling that the Crimson Tide, even though I know it's Death Valley at night, blah, 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 I get a feeling they're going to cover that. I think Jahmyr Gibbs, he's already has coming out party. I guess this will be his coming further out party. I think that he's going to do very, very well. LSU surrendered 200 yards on the ground to Tennessee and Florida. Yeah, right, exactly. Tennessee and Florida. So that doesn't bode well to me. Their secondary, however, has played fairly well. They're only averaging 204.3 yards passing per game and a 56.6 completion percentage. Now, they haven't faced a passing attack quite this developed. And also, they will be doing it without their starting safety and the person who runs the back half of their defense, Major, a.k.a. Montgomery Burns. But Major Burns, actually, I guess he will be back. No, I take it back. He will be back this week. So, but he won't be 100%, I don't think. But he should be back from a neck injury this week. So that may help them to hold up. They clearly did fairly well in some parts of their defense, but they are going to be hurting in other ways. They're going to be trying to shut down Will Anderson, which is going to free up Dallas Turner, I believe. Dallas Turner has 24 pressures and 3 sacks so far. He's just a sophomore. He's extremely explosive. Once again, yet another top 10 recruit to Alabama. I think this might be his coming out party. I know a lot of people are saying that 13 or 13.5, to me on when it is you got your money down, is a lot. And it is. A lot of points to cover. LSU is a good team. But I just think Alabama has answers to all of the problems that LSU can present. The only thing that I think might give them a chance, one, Jayden Daniels better have the game of his young life. He better, pass for 344, rush for 71, and have like 5 total touchdowns. They'll need to get a couple of turnovers out of Alabama. Contain the aforementioned Jahmyr Gibbs, which is easier said than done. And though it sounds funny, make Bryce Young beat you throwing the ball. I mean, that definitely sounds like a dangerous way to live. But what I would say is, if they can both run and pass, you're done. Like, you can just pack up the bus. if you can make them one-dimensional, you still might get blown out, quite frankly, but you have a better chance. And Bryce Young, as we mentioned before, is a smaller framed guy. If you get a lot of hits on him, even if he's very courageous, even if he's getting the ball off, at some point that will take a toll. And if your offense is doing very well, which I don't think it will, but let's say it does. Let's say they put up 34 points. They go up, they go into halftime, up like by 2 scores, and they're holding Gibbs in check. Now they have a chance to get hits that can result in strip sacks or maybe a tip ball interception or things like that. But to me, I don't hold out a lot of hope.
I don't understand what false sense of confidence is for the LSU Tigers. If there was an alternate spread of -20.5 for Alabama, I'd take it. I think we forget, when was the last time LSU played Alabama tough in Death Valley? Was it 2018? The year before the national championship? Because
I was going to say,
they got smoked.
Yeah, obviously Joe Burrow had sort of his coming out to some extent versus them.
Lest we forget, LSU plays Alabama better in Tuscaloosa than they do in Death Valley for the most part in recent memory. I don't like. I keep on people saying like, why is Bryce Young rated so high when Jaden Daniels is putting up similar numbers? Lest we forget he pooped the bucket against Tennessee, in what is literally the definition of a trap game for the Volunteers, where they got Alabama at home in the biggest rivalry of the season, in a game where we're all gathering cigars to hopefully smoke one day, in a game where we have person tied in 2006. All we got to do is get to LSU and Death Valley. That is the game that LSU was supposed to win. It was supposed to knock Tennessee off the high horse. What happened? They got blown out. I don't understand where this false sense of confidence for the Tigers are. It's Brian Kelly. Whenever he faces competition that's remotely close to him, he loses. Lest we forget, when he goes out and plays Michigan State, they lose on a fake field goal. When he goes out to the college football playoffs, he gets blown out by Clemson and blown out by Alabama. Lest we forget, whenever Notre Dame played anybody, they lost to Cincinnati at home last year. Do we forget that? Yes, Cincinnati had an incredible football team, but they're Cincinnati. They're in the American Conference. You're supposed to be the big, bad, fighting Irish. Let them trounce all over you. I would be very shocked if the game was close entering the third quarter. Bryce Young is playing at a completely different level, which is crazy because he won the Heisman last year.
Yeah,
he is literally you put young Russell Wilson, Donovan McNabb, and Tony Romo in one, and that's basically Bryce Young. Short, agile, can throw on the run, keeps his eyes downfield while moving, can make that little shitty thing to extend plays and also get yardage upfield. He's almost like a point guard at times. I've seen him make sideways passes, no-look passes, just the most incredible athletic plays. The only reason Alabama lost is because the defense couldn't stop Jalen Hyatt. That had nothing to do with this LSU defense. Not as good as you say they are. They've allowed big plays to some teams that don't have incredibly consistent offense. So when you face a team like Alabama, who knows that if they lose one more time, they're gonna not be competing for a national championship, it's gonna be a long day in the office for the Tigers. However, on the flip side, if you win this game, you're basically in the driver's seat for the SEC West. So I guess there's an upside. If LSU wins out, they're going to be in the college football playoffs with 2 losses. But it's not happening. It's going to be Alabama. They're going to come in. They're not going to mess around. They're going to put pressure on Jaden Daniels, and it's going to be reminiscent of an LSU played Mississippi State.
Yeah, I actually very much agree with you. I'm going to hit on 2 very quick HBCU games of the week, since I have to always include them. So the Howard Bison, who frankly I thought, shout out to my man Steve White, who frankly I thought would be a middle of the road team, are in competition, right, for a chance to win the MEAC, the Mideast Athletic Conference. But the MEAC's been absolute chaos since conference play began. Howard, believe it or not, is the unlikely leader early, thanks to beating, yes, my Spartans 49-21. I don't know if I have to get a tattoo of a bison or what, but yes, so they are in the driver's seat. North Carolina Central bounced back from a loss to South Carolina State to defeat Delaware State in the last minutes of their game, 28-21. So a win for Howard puts them in position to win the conference, while if NC Central wins, well, it would even more complicate a very messy MEAC. And then I'm going to talk about an in-state, speaking of rivalries, a rivalry that people don't talk about very much unless they're from my home state of Virginia. But Virginia Union, which...
Oh, no, Bill. Where'd you go? Well, we're just getting...
Oh, yep. I did the opposite of what I meant to do. So let's try that again. So if you're not from my home state of Virginia, this doesn't mean a lot to you. But the Trojans of Virginia State will take on Virginia Union in what is a big-time rivalry. The Panthers were undefeated until they faced Chowan last week and lost 26-21 to the Chowan Hawks in a really great game. And obviously, not only did it put their conference title hopes in jeopardy, also it puts their chances of making the Division II playoffs in jeopardy. But there's still a path for them to continue. Obviously, they need Chowan to lose at some point. But they need to win, and they obviously want to beat Virginia State anyway. It's a big-time rivalry in my state. Jada Byers didn't score a touchdown last week, which may not seem like a big deal, but he had scored a touchdown or more than one in every other game of the season. He is the most explosive player I've seen in Division II football, and I think he's going to have a big bounce-back game. If I were betting on this game, I'd be betting big on Virginia Union, and I think that – I don't even know what the line is, but I think they're going to cover whatever that number is. Anything else you want to leave people with before we close out the show, Brock?
No, just want to thank you guys for tuning in again. It's been a lot of fun. Can't wait till next week, and I'm just looking forward to another great week of college football.
Yes. Well, once again, I want to thank Kalen Jones and the History of Sports podcast that he does for the History Channel. The History Channel. He's not doing this for like Joe's Bed-Stuy Barbershop. He's doing this for the History Channel. Kalen Jones is a tremendous talent. If you really, really, really enjoy, like I said, the confluence of society and sports and our culture and politics and everything, check out the podcast. Once again, I thank you all. We will do this again in 1 week. And Brock, I will probably be bothering you at some point tomorrow about some of these games we'll be watching together. So I hope you have a great weekend.